And Danny, it's sharp 1:30, so you can now officially say hello to the people following us on this conversation.
Right, well, thank you, and I am delighted to be here, and I hope this is helpful to you, and I thank Juliano very much for inviting me to take part.
Excelente. I will do back and forth Portuguese and English. Bom, what you see here on the presentation then is exactly what I'm telling you in English. So welcome to all to the recording of this new program called The Elephant in the Room. And if you're curious to know why it is called The Elephant in the Room, this is the title of the second chapter of my book on evangelicals. And I argue that evangelicals are an elephant in the room. And this is an expression that refers to a topic that is very troubling, but usually people do not want to address it because of the possible bad consequences and noise and discussion. So this is the name of this program that will be recorded and then broadcasted through different media channels, including YouTube and podcast. And the idea of this book is basically to start a conversation about evangelical Christianity in Brazil. Our guest today is Professor Danny Miller from UCL. I'm sure the anthropologists in the room are familiar with Professor Miller's work. He's among the most respected anthropologists of his generation. And as we were talking, those who arrived earlier, he's at this point coordinating a project called Anthropology of Smartphones and Smart Aging, about the use of smartphones and also apps on the smartphone and its consequences to health during do you call third age? How do you call
That is one of the traditional terms. I think the way we call it is people who do not think they are either old or young.
Ok. Então, eu perguntei se o termo terceira idade também era usado. Ele disse que esse é um termo técnico, mas que eles se referem a essas pessoas como aquelas que não se descrevem nem como velhas, nem como novas. Not young and not old. Is that it?
Yes.
Excellent. So just to give you an idea of what Professor Miller has been publishing recently, he has published those 3 books that I separated on the top in Brazilian Portuguese, and they are available, including his last book, which is the result of the Why We Post project, but together with it, his book called Stuff and The Theory of Shopping, both available in Portuguese, and several other books, many of them related to material culture and shopping. Is there anything you would like to comment about this move from material culture, consumption, social media, and now social media aging and smartphones?
Yes, I don't think it is me that is moved. I think it is the world that is moved. Because if you're interested in our relationship to the material world around us, then actually the digital is a huge presence, which I would call material. Because just as you looked at photographs before, yes, now you look at photographs online, but they're still visual, they're still photographs. And you're still looking at, a smartphone is a thing. So for me, it was not a move. It was simply that we try and stay with the world that we find around us. And it is therefore completely natural to start concentrating on the digital world. And perhaps now with the pandemic, it is even more natural because it is even more central to our everyday life.
O professor está dizendo que, na verdade, não foi ele quem mudou de um tópico para outro, mas foi, na verdade, o mundo que vem se transformando. Ele vem dessa tradição da cultura material e ele considera o digital também um domínio do mundo material. A gente sabe, por exemplo, que quando a gente pensa num site, além desse elemento visual que aparece na tela, tem equipamentos, tem o computador das pessoas, tem o celular das pessoas, e essas são todas coisas materiais. Ele deu o exemplo das fotos, né? A fotografia antes estava no papel e hoje é digital. E nesse mundo em que a gente está vivendo agora, no contexto da pandemia, essa materialidade do digital se tornou ainda mais central para a relação entre as pessoas. I hope I'm being fair to your translation as I'm doing. I was very excited because it's everything working at once. It's the interviewer, the translator, anyways, next. So I'm saying this conversation will be in English and it will last about 30 minutes. Professor Miller said that kindly enough, he if we need more time to carry on the conversation, he will be glad to stay with us. So thank you very much, Danny, for coming. And you're the first guest of the Elephant in the Room. And to start, my first question here is, how were your first contacts with Pentecostals in Trinidad?
I think maybe I should start even before Trinidad, because I'm not sure people are aware of how diverse the world is with regard to Pentecostalism. And indeed, the more surprising thing might be thinking about the situation here in England, because I would imagine the vast majority of English people have never come across Pentecostalism of any kind. They have no idea this is an important part of religion. They have no idea. I think many people simply do not know it exists, or they think of it as some kind of fringe evangelical thing that maybe migrants would have churches. But the bulk of the English population have never been touched by Pentecostalism. And for me also, I simply grew up not knowing that this kind of existed. So it was only when I started working as an anthropologist that I suddenly came to countries where it was massively important. But that difference remains. It is not spread in England. It is not important in the English context, I would say, really at all. And religiosity generally is very much in decline in this country. But when I went to Trinidad, which would be some 30 years ago, I settled in an area, and actually I came with my wife, who was heavily pregnant, and my son David was born 3 months after I arrived. And then 2 doors from where I lived were a couple whose son was also born around the same time. And so naturally, we became close friends. And they remain close friends till today. The point about Claude and Linda was that Claude was always a devout Pentecostal, and was somebody who, as long as I have known him, has one of the things he has done is to create Pentecostal churches. He did it in Trinidad. They migrated actually to England for a little while, and they set up a church here in London, but then they decided to go back to Trinidad. They set up another church now, which they still run. So he is a pastor. The particular church is called the New Testament Church of God, and is one of, I would think, the most common Pentecostal churches. Now, Trinidad is a multi-religious island. It has Hindu and Muslim, Catholic. I noticed the census in 2011 said something like 12% Pentecostal. I am sure that is not true. I'm sure, from my own experience, it's probably at least a quarter of the population today. Might well be Pentecostal, and a variety of churches. But my entry into this was really through personal friendship with Claude. And so that meant that I encountered a particular kind of Pentecostalism, because you will be aware that some of the Pentecostal movements specialize in having, for example, vast churches. I've been to services with 10,000 people, and there's sort of a massive presence that's very kind of it tries to create something that is awe-inspiring. But actually, Claude's church is not at all like this. He really specialized in creating small community churches that are very devoted to the welfare of that particular population. Professionally, he is a doctor, and his wife, who also helps constantly in the church, is a teacher. And for them, there is no real separation between their religious life and their non-religious life. Actually, he's a leading medical expert. He has a regular slot on the television talking about things like diabetes as an expert. But for him, he sees the church as looking after the welfare of his congregation. I think his faith is absolute, and everything he does and thinks about is understood in Pentecostal terms. And his the way he serves his congregation, I think, would be seen as admirable. He is a very, they do a good deal of good. They care greatly about the community, and anybody in the community who has any kind of needs would come straight to the pastor, whether it's personal issues to do with relationships, but of course in his case equally medical and health problems. So my experience of Pentecostalism, at least in that instance, was a very benign one, of people who were very helpful. And when later on I came to Brazil and saw Juliano's work, it was not hard for me to understand why he also took this view of the positive possibilities of a church that particularly worked with often the very low income people that otherwise may be drawn to criminality and drugs and so forth. But the faith in the church was often the point at which they could really be turned around and actually help towards a life that was much more fulfilling and better for their welfare. And that meant that because I would sometimes go to their services, I became familiar with I think the church would be in many ways quite typical. That's to say, you would see people talking in tongues, you would see them laying on hands, they would collect tithes, people would get, in a sense, possessed. The main difference for my one encounter with the ones in Brazil is I found the ones in Brazil very loud. People, the pastor seemed to be almost screaming, and actually my friend Claude is quite a gentle. I couldn't possibly imagine him ever addressing a congregation in that kind of with that kind of tone and voice. He is somebody who I think has the tone of his voice relates to the way he understands his work and his mission to actually really to help people. And so although I've been to a variety of Pentecostal churches, I would say that's the kind of Pentecostal church I probably know best. And he, as I said, he's been doing this now for 30 years. And with a good deal of success. He still has a congregation, and he still does a good deal to help that congregation.
Bom, o professor Millet começou explicando que para ele o pentecostalismo, eu falar sobre o pentecostalismo, ele teria que dar um passo para trás e dizer que ele vem de um país, da Inglaterra, onde a religião há muitos anos vem deixando de ser importante. É um país em que as pessoas têm frequentado menos a igreja e tido menos crença, né, na religião, e que o inglês comum, inclusive hoje, ele veria a questão do evangélico relacionado provavelmente a um assunto de imigrantes e como alguma coisa exótica relacionada ao cristianismo, né? Daí ele começa a falar sobre a experiência que ele teve, né? Ou seja, quando ele começou a trabalhar como antropólogo, que ele se deu conta do tamanho e da importância desse assunto. Ele faz trabalho de campo há 30 anos na Ilha de Trindade, no Caribe, e ele chegou pela primeira vez com a esposa, a filha pequena, a bebê, e a mulher grávida, bastante grávida, foi em Trindade que nasceu o filho do professor Miller, o David, e eles tinham vizinhos com um filho da mesma idade. Esses vizinhos se chamavam Claude e Linda, e o Claude é ainda, né, um pentecostal devoto. Ele se dedica à tarefa de criar igrejas. A igreja que ele pertencia naquele momento se chamava Igreja do Novo Testamento. Ele trabalhou em Trindade, ele foi trabalhar na Inglaterra, em Londres, por algum tempo, depois ele voltou para Trindade. O professor Miller falou rapidamente do contexto, né? Trindade sendo um lugar multicultural, com uma grande presença de moradores que vieram originalmente da Índia, também uma presença de afro-trinidadianos, uma presença branca com católicos. Ele estimou na época, mas ele não tem certeza sobre esses números, que por volta de 12% seriam pentecostais, né? E que ele mantém essa relação muito especial com o Claude, e é por meio do Claude que ele teve a relação dele com o pentecostalismo, né? Um aspecto interessante dele do Claude é que ele gosta de abrir igrejas pequenas, né? Então, o professor Miller fala que frequentou alguns cultos de igrejas com dezenas de milhares de pessoas, mas que a especialidade do Claude, que é também um médico e um professor, é criar essas igrejas onde as pessoas estão muito relacionadas, muito juntas umas com as outras, como comunidade, né? E que, dentro desse contexto, o Claude não tinha, ele não observava no Claude essa diferença entre a igreja e o trabalho, apesar dele ser um médico conceituado, ter inclusive um programa de televisão como médico, mas ele chama atenção, o professor Miller chama atenção para essa relação dele. O Claude vê tudo a partir da ótica e do entendimento do pentecostalismo, e isso se traduz em, da melhor forma possível, se dedicar a fazer bem as pessoas, né? Então, a percepção que o professor Miller tem do pentecostalismo sempre foi muito benigna, né? Alguma coisa que traz um efeito bom, e quando ele veio me visitar durante a pesquisa de campo na Bahia, ele percebeu o mesmo tipo de situação que ele viu em Trindade, ou seja, com uma igreja com efeitos bastante vivos e reais, dentro de um contexto de alta criminalidade, muita pobreza, e a igreja servindo como esse espaço para transformar a vida das pessoas. A última comparação que ele fez foi que, em relação à Trindade e a experiência da Bahia, a grande diferença dos pentecostais baianos é que a igreja na Bahia era muito barulhenta, a lot of noise, enquanto no Brasil, enquanto em Trindade, ele não conhece uma pessoa mais gentil, mais tranquila do que o Claude. Danny, as you were talking about Claude and his experience in Trinidad, I don't know if you read this book called Gilead by Marilyn Robinson.
No, I've heard of it, but I never read it.
So I thought about Claude the way you're saying, because one of the characters is the father of the protagonist of the novel. He used to be a Pentecostal in America, in one of inside the Bible Belt, and somebody that saw the world through Pentecostalism, and it was during the Civil War. And because of Pentecostalism, he decided that he had to fight in the Civil War because it was his duty as a Christian to fight against slavery. So I think this is a good understanding of how people can get involved, or a certain type of Pentecostalism. It is not something that you do on the side, it's your whole life, and you cannot bound from the purpose of your truth and your religion.
Yeah, I agree. With somebody like Claude, absolutely everything is founded on him being a Pentecostal. There is nothing outside of that, nothing at all.
eu comentei com um professor sobre um livro chamado Gilead, de uma autora americana chamada Marilynne Robinson, e um dos personagens do Gilead é um pastor pentecostal que decide lutar na Guerra Civil Americana porque ele achava que era obrigação dele como cristão combater a escravidão. E eu achei um paralelo interessante para mostrar a ideia dessa devoção. Não existe o ser cristão e ao mesmo tempo ter a sua vida. A sua vida está relacionada ao cristianismo e você leva a sua vida a partir desses valores morais. Danny, coming to our next question. Can you tell me a little bit about the relationship between Pentecostals and medicine?
Yes, I mean, this is not particularly coming from Claude, because Claude is unusual because he's actually a professional medic. But I found that if you look across the spectrum of religious groups in Trinidad, there is increasing a tendency to have a kind of overlap between the form of biomedical treatment and the way the different kind of religious denominations, including Pentecostals, respond. So what you'll often get these days is that the religious groups will copy the format of a GP consultancy, a pharmacy, and a treatment. So, and you find there are like Hindu groups called like Kali Mai does this, maybe some Baptists, and right across the range. The idea is that when you have a problem, you come to the religious expert. The religious expert considers the problem, tells you that you need the following ritual objects. You go away and you purchase them or you obtain them, you come back with them, and then a ritual is carried out using those objects. And that kind of framing of alternative medicine, and it also includes things like, it extends to areas like Obia, or I don't know exactly what the Brazilian equivalent is, Africanist kind of influenced practices that are not necessarily Christian. And that has become a pattern. So in a way, Claude would be unusual because he doesn't do that. But you do see that there's been a kind of a parallel between the development of biomedical practices and religious practices, essentially as they are seen as dealing with treatments. But the problems people come with may not be a medical problem. It may be, you know, my husband is being unfaithful, or it may be, I think I am being affected by witchcraft, or I have an illness. And they will all become part of this kind of sort of medical relationship.
So, então, traduzindo aqui rapidamente, o professor mencionou que essa questão da medicina não está relacionada com a amizade que ele tem com Claude. Ele disse que observou em Trinidade essa tendência do pentecostalismo e de outras religiões também do país se aproximarem do ponto de vista estético, da maneira, da performance da medicina, da biomedicina, da medicina que a gente vê por aí. Então, se apresentando, inclusive, dentro desses espaços, com, enfim, uma arquitetura e com um ambiente parecido com uma sala de recepção de hospital ou uma farmácia, e as pessoas se aproximam, isso não apenas no pentecostalismo, mas em outras religiões também, e elas conversam com um intermediário, uma pessoa da religião que analisa qual é o problema, diz qual é o tratamento e ela se submete a esse tratamento como se fosse um tratamento médico. E ele disse que há muita influência ali do tipo de tratamento que se veria também entre religiosos da tradição afro-caribenha. Então, existe esse paralelo no pentecostalismo de Trindade entre o uso médico e o tratamento de questões tipo meu marido me abandonou, meu marido está com problema, meu filho está com problema, e isso é tratado dentro desses espaços. So, our next question, considering we're almost 30 minutes and we barely started. We're in the middle of our conversation. All right. So, thanks. So, considering all this, why do you think that the debates that we usually hear about Pentecostalism tend to be so negative? This is true. I mean, you have been following, we have been having this conversation for a long time. You actually visited Balduino while I was doing field work, and I was constantly bringing this to you. How is it that there is this huge distance between what these churches do to their communities on the side and how it is that they are perceived outside, usually through a negative filter?
I think there's a number of reasons, but let's start with the I think possibly one of the core issues, which has to do with money. The Claude is one kind of Pentecostal church, and he is very generous. I'm sure he has absolutely no idea of making money from his church. On the contrary, I'm sure he gives money to the church. But both in Trinidad and also when I worked in Jamaica, it became very clear to me that there are Pentecostal churches which are completely the opposite of that. And one of the key problems is that the Pentecostals usually have a system of tithing, which means that the people are expected to give 10% of their income to the church. And obviously that becomes very tempting because if you can establish a successful church, actually you can gain a good deal of money through exploiting this tithing. And I have met people who have confessed to me that they have a church solely for the purpose of making money for themselves, even though that's not obviously the way they would present it to others. So obviously when that becomes exposed as a form of financial exploitation, that would give a bad name to the other churches. I think it's also interesting to see this from the perspective of the people that go to the church. I mean, why do they continue to tithe in this manner? And something that I encountered, I think even more in Jamaica, was that I noticed that people gave money regularly to the church, but also they gave very regularly to various kinds of lottery system that are very, very popular. Sometimes, people would come twice a day to get your contributions to these lotteries. And what was interesting was that actually I found the two have a very similar logic. The lottery says you keep giving a small amount, but then one day, if the fate has it or luck has it, you will gain a very big amount. And when you go to the Pentecostal churches, you found that they, in many ways, have a very similar rhetoric. They basically often say, yes, you must give regularly, you must give to the church, but we are sure that one day your luck will come. One day there will be this miracle, and suddenly all the success that you failed to get through other channels, all the will come to you from God. So that the two work very closely together, and people, I think, often do believe that if they continue to give money to the church, they will become rich. And for those who are outside of the church, that is also, if you like, a problematic feature. And indeed, I think, well, maybe I could stop there because you're translating, but I have more to say.
Okay, so I'll translate quickly. O professor estava dizendo que, a princípio, as igrejas são mais vistas pela questão do dinheiro. Ele diz que o Claude, que se tornou um amigo próximo dele, é uma pessoa muito particular nesse sentido, mas que em pesquisas que ele, em trabalho de campo que o professor Miller fez na Jamaica e em Trinidade, ele observou muito como a questão do dízimo, ou seja, esse dinheiro que você dá regularmente, 10% do seu trabalho, dá margem para que a igreja se torne um negócio lucrativo, e que ele, durante essas pesquisas, conheceu pessoas que admitiam isso, não admitiam publicamente, mas admitiram para ele que o objetivo da igreja era fazer dinheiro, né, ganhar dinheiro, e que por conta disso, ou seja, porque as igrejas vêm abraçando esse tipo de negócio, e que é um negócio que não é bem visto, é entendido como uma forma de exploração e de manipulação, as pessoas que vêm de fora têm uma percepção negativa. Um outro motivo, ele observou no trabalho de campo uma relação curiosa entre o dízimo que se dá para as igrejas e a compra de bilhetes de loteria, que esses dois itens eles tinham uma lógica parecida. Ou seja, você compra o bilhete de loteria na expectativa de, eventualmente, ser gratificado, ganhar o prêmio e, por isso, poder realizar algumas coisas que você não pôde. E o dízimo seria mais ou menos a mesma coisa, a percepção sobre o dízimo. Ou seja, você vai dando dízimo e, eventualmente, você recebe o milagre ou o sucesso que você não conseguiu até então, e que esse é um outro motivo para as pessoas que percebem de uma forma negativa, que olham de fora, perceberem de uma forma negativa o pentecostalismo. You said you wanted to carry on a little bit.
Yeah, the only other element would be, I think there is seen to be a connection between particularly American, US forms of entrepreneurship and interest in money, and the way the Pentecostal works. So, for example, in Trinidad, you find that every now and then an American scheme, I don't know, for selling coffee or some health treatment becomes popular amongst the very same population. And it's based on the kind of pyramid scheme, you know, that if you go out and you sell these, or you get somebody else below you to sell it, then the money comes to you. And these pyramid schemes are based on meetings which are quite similar to the church, in the sense they really are all about faith. They are about, the idea is you must have the right, if you have the right motivation, if you have the right faith, then you can be part of this pyramid scheme and money will come to you. And because these things are often very corrupt and obviously do not work, then I think the association between that kind of money-driven faith and motivation also reflects badly on the way people see the Pentecostal church. And it's often the same people in both.
So Professor Miller was explaining also another element, that when I'm translating you to yourself, sorry. Ele estava falando ainda de um outro motivo para o pentecostalismo ser mal visto em algumas situações. Ele diz que esse tipo de pentecostalismo empreendedor, que tem uma raiz histórica nos Estados Unidos, muitas vezes se realiza por meio de esquemas de pirâmide, em que você faz alguma coisa e passa para as outras pessoas fazerem, e eventualmente, a partir da fé, entendendo que isso vai trazer vantagens para você também. E que ele viu algumas vezes esse tipo de esquema que apareceu nos Estados Unidos sendo copiado dentro do ambiente pentecostal de Trindade. E que a conexão entre o esquema e a religiosidade, ele vê como sendo a fé que a pessoa precisa ter, que ao fazer aquilo, ao fazer alguma coisa, a vida dela vai ser beneficiada. E, de novo, as pessoas que vêm de fora percebem isso de uma maneira negativa. I'm going to our third question. Yes.
Well, I'll give you one more, because that's only one side of, I think, the negativity. The other really is about what I would call Pentecostal intolerance. Mm-hmm. When the Catholic Church came into many of the areas where anthropologists would work, they tended to a more syncretic view. In other words, they were more respectful of traditional religion, and they simply tried to show how within that, you could then show people how the Catholic faith was really something that could incorporate those traditions, but redirect it towards Christian belief. And what the difference when you get the Pentecostals, and I first came across this when I was working in the South Pacific, is that they had no such syncretic ideal. For them, it is black and white. You either have true religion and everything else is false. So they actually would destroy the traditional shrines. They would deliberately pollute the things that have been respected in traditional times, and people found them extremely intolerant of any. They were so certain of themselves that really they became, I would say, they were seen as a kind of rather a bullying church, a church that simply wouldn't allow you to have any kind of compromise. And in a place like Trinidad, which, as I said, has Muslim and Hindu and Catholic and many other groups, there is an unpopularity of the Pentecostals because obviously for many people there are issues of intermarriage and complicated relationships. And this kind of clear insistence that one is truth and one is false, again, I think is one of the reasons why people tend to be quite negative about the Pentecostals, unless they are Pentecostal.
O professor Miller aqui trouxe um último elemento que apareceu dentro dos trabalhos de campo dele quando ele estava no Pacífico, né, trabalhando no Pacífico. E ele chama isso de uma intolerância pentecostal que é relacionada à presença do catolicismo, sendo o catolicismo nessas áreas uma religião mais aberta ao sincretismo, a incorporar outras tradições, e nessa incorporação cristianizar essas outras religiões locais nativas, né? Enquanto o pentecostalismo ele é explicitamente oposto a isso. Eles não querem a mistura, eles não querem o sincretismo. O projeto é ou você abraça a religiosidade deles ou nenhuma, e que, por conta disso, eles efetivamente destroem e poluem lugares de culto de outras religiões, que ele chamou de uma espécie de bullying religioso. E que em Trinidade, que é onde ele trabalhou, o fato do país ser tão profundamente multicultural, com presença islâmica, hindu, católica, afro-caribenha, etc., essa postura pentecostal produzia também uma perspectiva negativa das pessoas. Thank you, Danny. I'm going to the next question. So I know you study smartphones. How is it that you see the relationship between Pentecostals and the use of new media?
I think the first thing follows from what we've said before, that for a Pentecostal, everything has to be Pentecostal, and that means so does the phone. So you will find that Pentecostals will talk about the way that their phone is protected by the blood of Christ, or they have as their screensaver a religious image. They will take various measures to Christianize their phone. And this can come in various forms. I'm not sure you want to bother translating this, but I wrote at one time when I was talking about a young Pentecostal in Jamaica, actually, when I first studied mobile phones. And he was, from the age of 14, 15, in fact, he almost had to leave school because he was busy trying to get all the school children to join effectively him as the leader of a kind of semi-church. So the headmaster, giving the headmaster a lot of problems. And he was very, very active in using his phone. It became, because he was too young to have a church, the phone was where he had, the 60 people he was connected up with that would follow him in all his advice and teaching around Pentecostalism. But just to give you a sense of this, I'm going to briefly read something that he once said. He said, I think the phone is part of the prophecy of the mark of the beast. Because when I first had my phone company representative called me and started giving me information. And they can tell you how much you use, when you last made your last call and your text. They can even put a chip in it and know your whereabouts. In the Christian religion, we believe that in the last days there will be devices of the devil to stop God's people from going to heaven. They will have the mark on their forehead or on their right hand, and you won't be able to buy or sell without the mark. So I conclude that this chip in the phone will encourage advancement in the way of the mark of the beast. And that's how they will get to know the different informations about different people. I heard there was a chip called the DigiAngel that can pick up 2,000 informations on one person in about 1 second, etc., etc. So you can see this kind of language about that everything about the phone is interpreted through these concepts of good and evil, Satan, the devil, God, and being saved, etc. So that would be one example. I could then come to another.
O professor está dizendo que o paralelo que existe entre o estudo dos smartphones e o que ele observa em relação ao pentecostalismo é que, de novo, a religião, como religião, o pentecostalismo não aceita divisões, ou seja, ou o telefone ele se torna um objeto do pentecostalismo ou ele é um objeto demoníaco que desvia as pessoas do desejo delas de irem para o paraíso, né? Então, ele fala do telefone, ele tendo observado o telefone sendo cristianizado por meio de orações, por meio de referências e imagens, e daí ele cita uma história de um jovem pentecostal na Jamaica que ele conheceu, um rapaz de 14, 15 anos que quase foi expulso da escola porque ele pregava a palavra, ele usava a oportunidade dele de estar na escola para pregar para as outras pessoas. E ele tinha uma conexão muito profunda com o telefone, porque o telefone era o ponto de encontro dele com um grupo de 50, 60 pessoas que o acompanhavam. E daí o professor citou do livro dele uma fala desse rapaz, que eu não vou traduzir literalmente, mas vou dar a ideia para vocês do que ele fala, né? Eu acho que, ele diz, o rapaz, eu acho que esse telefone tem a marca do diabo. E eu acho que essa marca do diabo é o chip. Na Bíblia diz que quando a gente chegar no final dos tempos, tudo que for comercializado vai ter a marca do diabo. E o chip, ele é capaz de dizer tudo sobre você, onde você está, o que você compra, com quem você fala, e que, portanto, esse é mais um exemplo que eu tenho de que esse objeto ele é um objeto que mostra o fim dos tempos. Daí eu termino essa citação e o professor fala sobre, de novo, como que dentro do contexto da visão de mundo, da cosmovisão pentecostal, tudo é interpretado a partir dessas ideias religiosas. Do you want to complement that?
Okay, so I started with the example of Claude and his church, which is a small community, more, if you like, relaxed. And then you have these other examples that are more kind of extreme and literal. And if you look at the relationship to these digital technologies, I think you can see a similar kind of spectrum. So in my first book about internet in Trinidad, on the one hand, I talk about some charismatics, not actually Pentecostal, but you could say related a bit. And for them, they actually saw all sorts of advantages in the internet because they were having quite deep philosophical discussions across the different Caribbean islands. And they were saying, it's great now because face-to-face is like too quick. You don't have time to think about things, and letters were too slow. And email was good because it allowed you time to compose something a bit more profound and then exchange it with the next person. And so they kind of use the possibilities for quite deep discussion. On the other hand, I remember working there with an apostolic church, which would be a variant of Pentecostal. And for them, it is a much more literal. That is to say, for them, it is, why does the internet exist? And the internet is given to us by God. So we have to understand, why does God give us the internet now? What's the purpose? And the purpose for them clearly is that the mission is to give out the word, right? And the internet is clearly a more effective way of giving out the word, all right, to the world. For them, they saw the population of the entire world, right, as they would see it. And so they actually therefore felt, well, if that is what God is telling you, they abandoned all other forms of religious practice. They no longer had church services. They no longer had all the things they did. They became 100% digital, did everything on the internet only, because they saw that was the proper interpretation that they had from believing that the internet, that the invention of the internet is a message from God, as to how they should practice their Pentecostalism.
O professor estava dizendo que começou a falar do Claude e da tradição pentecostal mais específica, e a partir daí foi se movendo para outros pontos do espectro religioso pentecostal, e com frequência viu paralelos entre a questão religiosa e a questão da tecnologia. Ele disse que no primeiro livro que ele publicou sobre internet e trindade, e eu vou acrescentar depois o título do livro aqui para quem estiver interessado, ele fala primeiro sobre a percepção que carismáticos tinham sobre a internet, e que havia dentro desse grupo uma discussão sobre a novidade que a internet trazia por permitir que as pessoas conversassem com mais cuidado, com mais delicadeza pela internet, porque você podia pensar melhor no que você ia falar, ao contrário do que acontecia cara a cara, em que as coisas eram mais rudes, mais rápidas, menos pensadas, né? E esse era a percepção que tinha da internet esse grupo carismático. E ele menciona depois um grupo que ele chama de apostólico, que tinha uma percepção bastante diferente e pragmática da internet, que partia da pergunta, para que Deus nos trouxe a internet? E a conclusão que eles chegaram é que a função da internet, ou seja, a intenção de Deus ao criar essa tecnologia, era que as pessoas usassem para levar a palavra de Deus ao mundo. E, em função disso, esse grupo religioso abriu mão de todas as suas presenças em outros ambientes, fecharam as suas igrejas e passaram a atuar apenas via internet, porque essa era a função da internet, era levar a palavra de Deus para outras pessoas. Shall we go to the last question? All right. The last and final question. So, do you think Pentecostals are the same everywhere? Or do you think that there is an adaptation that takes place once they move from country to country?
Yes, I think in anthropology, we tend to look for cultural continuity. We expect that the deep traditions of an area are going to have an impact, although we have to recognize when that's not true. I think Pentecostalism itself is a homogenizing religion. It's one that would try, as we said earlier, to not respect those traditions and simply make everybody Pentecostal in its own image. But the first place I came across Pentecostals was when I was working in this country called the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific, which is a small country, only 200,000 people, but every little place was different. They have many, many languages, even though it's such a small population, many different languages, a difference even in the look of people. It had always had these strong diversity in that small place. And what was fascinating was that when Christianity, including Pentecostal, comes in, you find that actually every little settlement ends up going a slightly different way. Now, it might be because one goes to Seventh-day Adventist and one goes to Jehovah's Witness, one goes to one kind of Pentecostal. And then, as happens, I think, also in Brazil and other places, you will get local versions of the Pentecostal. people who become seen as local saints or people that develop effectively their own version based on not wanting to see this as an import from the US or whatever, but like a Brazilian or Solomon Island in this case equivalent. And what was interesting was that as a result, every single settlement was a different form of Christianity from every other settlement that you could find, the ones nearby. So in that sense, the attempt to homogenize the population in Pentecostalism failed. What instead had happened was they had diversified the Pentecostals and also the other Christian denominations to reflect this tradition of diversity. And I think that's the kind of way in which anthropologists can observe that despite what Pentecostalism is trying to do, actually you may find that there are local elements of the way culture operates that will actually impose themselves upon the way Pentecostalism is constructed in that particular region.
O professor está dizendo que, sobre essa pergunta, né, se o pentecostalismo é igual em todos os lugares, ele fala que na tradição antropológica a gente pensa sempre em continuidade, e particularmente isso parece ser verdade em relação ao pentecostalismo, porque eles têm essa postura homogeneizante de se tornar a maneira única e exclusiva de se ter uma relação com Deus. Daí ele conta sobre a primeira experiência que ele teve com o pentecostalismo, que foi nas ilhas, acho que são as Ilhas Salomon, eu não sei como é que chama em português, alguém souber me corrija, mas que é um lugar com algumas centenas de milhares de pessoas, um lugar muito pequeno, e que, no entanto, em cada vilarejo existiam línguas diferentes, um lugar muito diverso do ponto de vista linguístico, e que quando o pentecostalismo chegava e outras tradições evangélicas, cada grupo que o adotava transformava o pentecostalismo não em relação àquilo que estava no seu entorno de outras igrejas, mas em relação a uma versão que eles achavam ser mais própria, mais original, mais local, mais relacionada a eles e diferente dos outros. Então ele entende que, ele percebia que cada vilarejo tinha igrejas com características diferentes, apesar dessa intenção homogeneizadora, a própria igreja, a maneira como a igreja funciona, ela busca essa criação de uma identidade íntima, e que essa é uma maneira útil para se observar do ponto de vista antropológico o pentecostalismo. I hope I did the translation well, and soon enough we'll find out from people that will watch this video. So we are arriving at the end of this very nice talk, very generous talk with Professor Daniel Miller. The Elephant in the Room, o Elefante na Sala, is this new program about evangelic Christianity that is discussed mainly through the lenses of social sciences. It's a very, very important subject in the world, and in Brazil particularly. And there are many studies that have been done and are currently being developed in regard to this theme, and yet, interestingly enough, it's yet a very little known subject. So next week, hopefully we'll come back to discuss this theme again. And I again thank Professor Miller for very generously using 1 hour of his time to have this very nice conversation with us. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you in turn for your generous invitation, but also to just give my complete agreement. I think that the impact of Pentecostalism is massive. I think it's hugely important that we have a better understanding of it. I really appreciate, as an anthropologist, that you are taking, in a sense, an empathetic view, which I think is the proper way to understand these things. And I really hope, therefore, that this is a very successful venture, because I do believe that it's a very significant one.
Thank you very much, Danny. I'll translate it briefly. O professor estava falando que ele acredita, sim, concordando com a ideia que o pentecostalismo é um tema de uma importância massiva no mundo hoje, é alguma coisa que precisa ser melhor conhecida e que ele recomenda a maneira como eu venho tratando esse assunto, que é por meio da empatia, que é o meio antropológico, que essa é a maneira dos antropólogos há muitos anos ajudarem a estabelecer pontes entre assuntos e comunidades e grupos na sociedade. Thanks very much, Danny. We really appreciate that.
Okay, right.